The taxi pulled away, and I stood there in the driveway, staring at my house. Something was wrong. The shutters were a different color, beige. They'd been dark green when I left 3 weeks ago. I'd cut my Florida vacation short by 2 days. My daughter-in-law, Sarah, had been sending worried texts about a hurricane heading toward Tampa, and I didn't want to make her anxious by staying. The flight back to Portland had been bumpy, and I was exhausted, but all I wanted was to sleep in my own bed. The front yard looked different too. The azaleas I'd planted last spring were gone. In their place, cheap ornamental grasses swayed in the November wind. I pulled my suitcase up the walkway, fumbling for my keys. The spare was supposed to be under the third flower pot on the porch, the one with the chipped rim, but there were no flower pots. Just a new doormat that said, "Welcome" in cursive letters I didn't recognize. My key slid into the lock, turned halfway, stopped. I tried again. Nothing. The lock had been changed. I knocked, waited, knocked harder. My hand was shaking. This was my house. I'd lived here for 32 years. My wife Elizabeth and I had bought it when Michael was still in diapers. No one answered. I walked around to the back, my suitcase bumping behind me on the gravel path. The gate was locked with a combination padlock I'd never seen before. I reached over, fumbling with the latch from the inside, and let myself into the backyard. The swing set was gone. Michael had played on that swing set until he was 12. I'd spent a whole weekend assembling it, cursing at the instructions, while Elizabeth brought me lemonade and laughed at my frustration. The back door was locked too. Different lock. I cupped my hands against the kitchen window and peered inside. Empty. The kitchen table was gone. Elizabeth's collection of ceramic roosters that had sat on the shelf above the stove, gone. The curtains we'd picked out together at that little shop in Selwood, gone. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe right. I tried the basement window. It was old and had never latched properly. I'd been meaning to fix it for years. My fingers found the edge, and it slid open with a familiar scraping sound. I squeezed through, dropping onto the concrete floor harder than I'd intended. Pain shot through my hip. I was 68, not 38, but I was in my own house, and something was very, very wrong. The basement was empty too. The old couch where Michael used to play video games, gone. The boxes of Christmas decorations Elizabeth had organized by color, gone. The washer and dryer, gone. I climbed the stairs to the main floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. The living room was a shell. Different paint on the walls, lighter. The hardwood floors had been refinished. They gleamed under the afternoon light coming through bare windows. No furniture, no photographs, no evidence that the Morrison family had ever lived here. I walked through every room. Master bedroom empty. Michael's old room empty. The bathroom where I'd taught him to shave, new fixtures, new tiles. In what used to be my home office, I found a stack of boxes in the corner. My hands were trembling as I opened the first one. Papers. Legal documents. I pulled them out, spreading them on the floor. Escrow papers. For this house, my house. Sale date, October 23rd, 3 weeks ago, 2 days after I'd left for Florida. Seller, David R. Morrison. Buyer, Covenant Property Holdings, LLC. Sale price, $450,000, 0. I read it again, and again. The words didn't change. Someone had sold my house while I was gone. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and called Michael. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. Then I called my neighbor, Patricia. She'd lived next door for 20 years. She answered on the third ring. David, is that you? Patricia, what happened to my house? There was a long pause. David, honey, I thought you moved. There was a moving truck here about 2 weeks ago. Cleaned the whole place out. Your son was here supervising everything. Michael was here? Yes. He said you decided to move to Florida permanently to be closer to Sarah and the grandkids. He seemed very organized about it all. Had a whole crew. I never, Patricia. I never authorized any of this. Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was quieter. David, are you okay? Do you need me to come over? I'm in the house right now. It's completely empty. All my things are gone. Should I call someone? Your son? Or, no, No, I'll figure this out. Thank you, Patricia. I hung up before she could ask more questions. My mind was racing. I opened the next box. More papers. Bank statements. But not from my bank. These were from First Columbia Credit Union, an account I didn't recognize. Account holder: David R. Morrison. Home equity line of credit, $180,000. Disbursed October 20th. I felt like I was going to be sick. The next paper was a notarized power of attorney document, dated September 28th, 2 weeks before I'd left for Florida. It granted Michael Morrison full legal authority over all my financial affairs. My signature was at the bottom, except I'd never signed it. I stared at that signature for a long time. It looked like mine. The way the D swooped, the way the R connected to the rest of my name. Someone had practiced this. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Morrison? This is Detective Sarah Chen with Portland Police. We received a call about a possible break-in at 2847 Maple Grove Avenue. Are you currently at that address? This is my house, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. I own this house. Sir, our records show that property was recently sold. The new owner called us. They're on their way there now and reporting that someone broke in through a basement window. I broke in through my own window because someone changed my locks and sold my house without my permission. I see. Sir, can you remain at the location? I'm sending officers to sort this out. I sat down on the floor in what used to be my living room and waited. 2 patrol officers arrived first. They were polite but skeptical. I showed them my driver's license with this address, showed them the escrow papers I'd found, showed them the forged power of attorney. I was in Florida visiting my daughter-in-law and grandchildren, I explained. I came home 2 days early and found this. The younger officer was looking at me with a mixture of pity and suspicion. I knew what he was thinking. Confused elderly man. Maybe dementia. Maybe he forgot he sold his house. Mr. Morrison, the older officer said gently, do you have other family we can call? Someone who might be able to help clarify the situation? My son, I said. Michael Morrison. But I think he's the one who did this. They exchanged a glance. Detective Chen arrived 20 minutes later. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed, with gray streaks in her black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She looked at the papers spread across the floor, then at me. Tell me everything, she said. So I did. I told her about Michael, how he'd struggled after his divorce 2 years ago, how he'd been unemployed for the past year, doing odd jobs, always asking for loans, how I'd given him $5,000 in August to help with rent, how he'd asked for $10,000 more in September, and I'd said no, I'd already helped him too much, and I needed to protect my retirement savings, how he'd offered to check on the house while I was in Florida, how I'd given him the spare key. Did you give him power of attorney? Chen asked. Never. I wouldn't do that without talking to my lawyer first. She took the document, studying it carefully. This notary seal, do you recognize the name? I looked. Rebecca Walsh, Notary Public, Oregon State Seal. No, I said. Chen made a phone call, stepping away. I heard her say, run a check on this notary seal number. She came back 5 minutes later. Rebecca Walsh's notary license was revoked 6 months ago for falsifying documents. The seal on this power of attorney is fake. Something shifted in my chest. This was real. This was documented. I wasn't confused or crazy. We need to bring your son in for questioning, Chen said. I gave her Michael's address, or what I thought was his address. A small apartment in Gresham he'd been renting since the divorce. Chen made another call. Came back frowning. That address. He moved out 2 months ago. Do you have another way to reach him? I tried calling him again. Voicemail. I tried texting. Michael, this is your father. I need to speak with you immediately about the house. No response. Mr. Morrison, Chen said, I need you to come down to the station and give a formal statement. Can you do that today? What about my house? Where am I supposed to go? Unfortunately, until we sort out the legal ownership, you can't stay here. Do you have somewhere you can go? A hotel? Or maybe your neighbor? Patricia took me in that night. She made up her spare bedroom and heated up some leftover casserole while I sat at her kitchen table, staring at nothing. I knew something was off, she said, setting a plate in front of me. When Michael was here with that moving truck, he just seemed cold, efficient, not sad at all about you leaving. I asked him if you were really okay with moving, and he just smiled and said, "Dad's ready for a fresh start." I couldn't eat. My mind kept racing through the numbers. The house had sold for $485,000. The home equity loan was $180,000. If he'd cleared out my bank accounts too. "Patricia, can I use your computer?" I logged into my bank account. My hands were shaking so hard I mistyped the password 3 times. Checking account, $328.42. It should have had $12,000. Savings account, $0. It should have had $95,000. My retirement account through Edward Jones. Transfer pending. $65,000 moved to an external account on October 19th. Total, $330. Null. Gone. I put my head in my hands and tried not to cry in front of Patricia. Over the next 3 days, Detective Chen pieced together what Michael had done. The power of attorney had been forged on September 28th. Michael had used it to access my bank accounts, my retirement fund, and to take out the home equity line of credit. He'd transferred everything to a new account he'd opened in my name at a credit union I'd never heard of, but with his name as co-owner. On October 20th, he'd listed my house with a real estate agent, claiming I'd moved to Florida and wanted a quick sale. He'd accepted a cash offer from an LLC, $485,000, below market value for a fast closing. The closing had happened on October 23rd. The money went into that joint account. Within 48 hours, Michael had withdrawn $520,000. In total, the house sale, the equity loan, my savings, my retirement fund, and transferred it to another account. That account belonged to Covenant Property Holdings, LLC. Covenant Property Holdings was registered in Oregon 2 months earlier. The sole owner, Rebecca Walsh. Michael's girlfriend. "We found them," Chen called to tell me on the 4th day. "They bought a property in Bend, 4-bedroom house, mountain views, paid in cash. $1,000,000. With my money," I said. "Yes. What about the rest?" "We're still tracking it. Looks like they bought 2 vehicles, paid off Rebecca's student loans, and, Mr. Morrison, they bought tickets to Costa Rica. One-way tickets. Departure date was tomorrow. They'd almost gotten away. The arrest happened at the new house in Bend. Chen let me watch the body camera footage later. I'd requested it. Needed to see it." Michael answered the door in jeans and a flannel shirt, holding a cup of coffee. He looked relaxed, happy. The house behind him was beautiful, I had to admit. Vaulted ceilings, big windows, overlooking the mountains. "Michael Morrison?" the officer said. "Yeah? You're under arrest for identity theft, fraud, forgery, and grand theft. Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Michael's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, fear, then something harder. Defiant. "This is a mistake," he said. "My father gave me permission for all of this. He has dementia. He's not mentally competent anymore." I'd been standing in Chen's office when she'd shown me that footage. Those words hit me like a physical blow. "He's confused," Michael continued as they cuffed him. "He asked me to handle his affairs because he couldn't do it himself anymore. I have the power of attorney. This is legal." "The power of attorney is forged," the officer said. "And your father is very much mentally competent. He filed the police report himself." Michael's expression changed again. This time, just for a second, I saw something I'd never seen in my son's eyes before. Hatred. Rebecca tried to run. She made it to the back door before they caught her in the yard, halfway to the tree line. She was crying, screaming that it wasn't her fault, that Michael had made her do it, that she didn't know the money was stolen. They found the forged notary stamp in her purse. The legal process took 8 months. My lawyer, Tom Bradford, was a patient man in his 50s, who'd handled Elizabeth's estate when she passed. He explained everything in terms I could understand, even when I felt too tired and broken to listen. The house sale was voided. The transaction had been based on forged documents. But the LLC that bought it, Covenant Property Holdings, technically no longer existed. Rebecca had dissolved it after the purchase. The property she'd bought in Bend was seized as proceeds of crime, but selling it to recover my money would take time. The home equity loan was harder. The credit union argued that they'd followed proper procedures. The power of attorney looked legitimate. The notary seal appeared valid. My lawyer argued back that I wasn't liable for a loan I never authorized. It would go to civil court. My savings account and retirement fund, Michael had withdrawn that cash. Much of it was gone. Spent on the Bend house, the cars, paying off Rebecca's debts. They recovered about $75,000 from seized accounts. The rest was unrecoverable. I moved into a small apartment in Beaverton while it was all sorted out. Patricia helped me buy basic furniture from IKEA. I assembled it myself, a table, a bed, a bookshelf, and tried not to think about the swing set I'd built 30 years ago in a backyard that wasn't mine anymore. The trial was in April. Michael and Rebecca were charged separately, but the trials ran concurrently. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically: the forged power of attorney, the bank records, the property purchases, the Costa Rica tickets. They presented my medical records showing I'd had a complete cognitive evaluation in July, perfectly healthy. No dementia, no incompetence. My doctor testified that I was as sharp as men 20 years younger. Michael's defense lawyer tried to paint me as a confused elderly man who'd given permission and then forgotten. But they had the evidence against them. My emails to Michael from September, asking him to stop requesting money, text messages where he'd promised to take care of everything while I was in Florida. Patricia's testimony about how odd his behavior had been during the move. And they had Rebecca's fake notary seal. That was the nail in the coffin. The prosecution called me to the stand on the third day. I was nervous. I hadn't spoken to Michael since before I'd left for Florida. Hadn't seen him except in the courtroom, where he sat with his lawyer, barely looking at me. The prosecutor asked me to explain my relationship with my son. I told them about teaching him to ride a bike on this very street, just a few blocks from the courthouse, about helping him with homework at the kitchen table every night, about paying for his college education, $40,000 I'd saved carefully over 18 years, about standing next to him at his wedding, proud and hopeful, about Elizabeth's funeral, where Michael had held my hand and promised he'd always be there for me. The prosecutor showed me the power of attorney. "Is this your signature, Mr. Morrison?" "It looks like my signature," I said. "But I never signed that document. I never gave my son permission to access my accounts or sell my house." "Why do you think your son did this?" I looked at Michael then, really looked at him. He was staring at the table in front of him, jaw clenched. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I've been trying to understand it for 8 months. Was it the divorce? The unemployment? Did I fail him somehow as a father? But then I remember what the detective told me. He bought a house with my money. He was planning to start a new life in Costa Rica. And I think he just wanted what he wanted, and he decided I'd lived long enough to deserve what I had." The courtroom was very quiet. "When he was arrested," I continued, "he told the police I had dementia, that I was incompetent. I think that's the worst part. Not the money, not even the house. It's that he was willing to erase me, to make me into nothing, a confused old man who couldn't manage his own affairs. That's how he justified it to himself." Michael finally looked at me then. I'd expected anger or defiance. Instead, he just looked empty. Rebecca's trial was shorter. Her lawyer tried to argue she'd been manipulated by Michael, that she was a victim too. But the prosecution showed text messages between them, planning the whole thing. "Rebecca, your dad's going to figure it out eventually." Michael, "Not if we're in Costa Rica. By the time he gets back, it'll be done." Rebecca, "What if he comes back early?" Michael, "He won't. And if he does, we tell everyone he's senile. Who are they going to believe?" I sat in the courtroom and listened to my son's plans to destroy me, read out loud by a prosecutor who didn't know me, who didn't know that Michael used to call me every Sunday just to talk, who didn't know that the last thing I'd said to him before leaving for Florida was, "I love you, son." The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Michael Morrison, guilty on all counts, 15 years in state prison. Rebecca Walsh, guilty on all counts, 10 years in state prison. I should have felt something. Relief, justice, victory. Instead, I just felt old. The house was returned to me in June. nearly a year after I'd found it empty. The legal fees had taken $50,000. The Ben property had sold, but after liens and costs, I recovered only $180,000 of the $340,000 stolen. I walked through the empty rooms one last time before the estate sale. I decided to sell it for real this time, my choice. Too many ghosts in these walls now. I thought about the 32 years Elizabeth and I had lived here, teaching Michael to walk in the hallway, his first day of school photos on the front steps, Christmas mornings opening presents in the living room, all of it overlaid now with the memory of walking in to find it stripped bare, violated. Patricia found me sitting on the floor of the master bedroom, where Elizabeth's side of the closet had been, where she'd hung her dresses and kept her shoes organized by season. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I keep thinking about something Michael said to me once," I told her. He was maybe 14, and he'd been caught shoplifting a video game with some friends. I picked him up from the police station, and on the drive home, I asked him why he did it. You know what he said? Patricia sat down beside me on the floor. He said, "I wanted it, and I didn't want to wait." I told him that's not how life works, that you have to earn things. That stealing from others is the worst kind of selfishness because it treats people like they don't matter, like they're just obstacles to what you want. I laughed, but it came out wrong. Bitter. I thought he learned that lesson. He apologized. He was never in trouble again. Good grades, college, married a nice girl. I thought I'd raised him right. You did raise him right, Patricia said. Something went wrong later. That's not on you. He looked at me, his own father, and saw an obstacle. Something to get around. And when I wouldn't give him more money, he decided to just take it all. We sat there for a while in silence. "What are you going to do now?" she asked. I bought a small condo in Lake Oswego. 2 bedrooms, nice view of the lake, close to that coffee shop I like. I stood up, my hip aching the way it had since I'd dropped through the basement window a year ago. I'm starting over. At 69. The estate sale was on a Saturday. Strangers walked through my house, buying pieces of my life. The coffee table, Elizabeth had refinished. The bookshelf I'd built. The dishes we'd received as wedding gifts. I kept 3 things. A photo of Elizabeth, our wedding rings, and a picture of Michael when he was 5, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up a fish he'd caught on our camping trip to Crater Lake. I don't know why I kept that photo. Maybe because I need to remember that the boy existed before the man who stole from me. Maybe because grief isn't clean, and you can love someone and hate what they've become at the same time. The condo in Lake Oswego is quiet, too quiet sometimes, but I've made it work. I volunteer at the senior center downtown twice a week, teaching financial literacy classes, how to protect yourself from fraud, and warning signs your family member may be scamming you. The classes are always full. More people have stories like mine than you'd think. Last month, a woman named Grace started coming to my classes. 73, widowed, suspicious that her nephew was trying to get her to sign over her house. I helped her find a lawyer, helped her set up protections. She cried and hugged me after the 3rd class, thanking me for probably saving her home. "How did you know all this?" she asked. "Experience," I said. Tom, my lawyer, sometimes meets me for coffee. He introduced me to his father, Frank, who's 80 and also widowed. Frank and I play chess at the coffee shop on Tuesdays. He's terrible at chess, but good company. He tells stories about his time in the Merchant Marine, and I tell him about my years as an accountant, back when we did everything on paper and calculators were the size of toasters. Neither of us talk about our kids. I know he has a daughter in Seattle who never calls. He knows I have a son who's in prison. That's enough. Patricia drives down from Portland once a month. We have dinner at a nice Italian place near the lake. She updates me on the neighborhood. The Johnsons got divorced. The Chen's daughter had a baby. Someone bought my old house and painted it blue. I don't ask if it looks good blue. I don't want to know. I haven't visited Michael in prison. He's at Snake River Correctional Institution in Eastern Oregon. He wrote me one letter, about 6 months into his sentence. It's still unopened on my bookshelf. Sometimes I think I should read it. Maybe there's an apology in there. Maybe there's an explanation that would help me understand. Maybe he's had time to think about what he did, and there's remorse. But then I remember his face when he was arrested, that flash of hatred, and I remember what he said, that I had dementia, that I was incompetent. He was willing to make me into nothing to justify what he'd done. I don't think I want to know what's in that letter. Sarah, Michael's ex-wife, called me last month. She'd heard about everything through mutual friends. She cried on the phone, apologizing, even though none of this was her fault. "I should have warned you," she said. "Toward the end of our marriage, he got so focused on money, on what we didn't have. He kept talking about how his inheritance would solve everything. And I said, 'Your father's not even 70. Don't talk like that.' It scared me. That's part of why I left." She paused. Did he mention me after?" "No," I said gently. "I think he blamed you for the divorce, for his problems. I was married to him for 8 years. I loved him. And I didn't know him at all. I raised him for 35 years, I said. I didn't know him either." We talked for an hour. She told me about her new job in Tampa, her small apartment, how she was thinking about dating again but wasn't sure she could trust anyone. I told her about my classes at the senior center, about Frank and chess, about the lake view from my condo. Before we hung up, she said, "David, you were a good father. This isn't your fault." I thanked her, but I'm not sure I believe her. I think about nature versus nurture, about whether I missed something when Michael was young, some sign that he was capable of this, or whether life just beat him down until he broke in a way I never expected. I think about the $5,000 I gave him in August, and how if I'd said no then too, would it have mattered? Would he have found another way? Or would that final rejection have been the thing that pushed him to do what he did? I'll never know. What I do know is this. I'm 69 years old. I have $230,000 in assets, the recovered money, the house sale proceeds, what's left of my retirement fund. It's enough to live on if I'm careful. I have a small condo with a view of the lake. I have friends now, Patricia, Tom, Frank, the people from my classes at the senior center. I have a purpose, helping others avoid what happened to me. And I have my memories of Elizabeth and of the Michael who existed before he became someone I didn't recognize. It's not the retirement I planned. It's not the relationship with my son I'd imagined, where he'd visit on weekends and bring hypothetical grandchildren to play by the lake. But it's my life. Mine. Not stolen. Not forged. Not taken by someone who looked at me and saw nothing but an obstacle to what he wanted. Last week, I taught a class on setting up trusts and protections for your assets. A man in his 50s, my age, when Elizabeth died, raised his hand. "How do you do this?" he asked. "How do you talk about this stuff without being angry all the time?" Everyone in the class turned to look at me. "I am angry," I said honestly. "I'm angry every single day. But I'm also here. I'm alive. And my son, the person who did this to me, doesn't get to take anything more than he already took. Not my present. Not my future. Not my ability to help people like you." I paused. He took my money and my house. He took the person I thought he was. But he didn't take me. I'm still here. And that's the only victory that matters. The class was quiet for a moment. Then the man nodded. "Thank you," he said softly. After class, Grace waited for me by the door. "David, some of us are going to the diner for coffee. Would you like to come?" I thought about my quiet condo, about the unopened letter on the shelf, about eating dinner alone while watching the sun set over the lake. "Yes," I said. "I'd like that." We walked to the diner together, 6 of us from the class. We talked about everything except fraud and family betrayal. We talked about the weather, about a new Thai restaurant someone had tried, about whether the Trailblazers had any chance this season. Normal things, small things, the things that make up a life. I ordered coffee and pie. And I laughed at Frank's terrible joke about his chess game last week. And for an hour, maybe 2, I didn't think about Michael at all. That night, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the lake. The water was dark, reflecting the lights from the houses on the opposite shore. Somewhere out there, other families were having dinner, watching TV, putting kids to bed, living their lives. And I was living mine. Different than I planned, smaller in some ways, but mine. My phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Thanks for dinner last month. Same time next month? My treat. I texted back. It's a date. Then I went inside, turned off the lights, and went to bed. Tomorrow I'd teach another class. Frank and I had chess. Sarah was calling in the afternoon to tell me about a guy she'd been on 2 dates with, and whether she should risk a third. Tomorrow I'd wake up in my own place, in my own bed, and I'd make my own coffee the way I liked it. And that would be enough. It would have to be.